The trouble started the morning I got back from my 2-week trip to Denver for a logistics expo. I wasn't even home 5 minutes when I saw them. 2 men in black tactical-style uniforms standing near the edge of my driveway, sunglasses on, radios clipped to their vests, and the bold white letters HOA Security Enforcement stitched on the front like they were prepping for a hostage crisis instead of patrolling a quiet rural neighborhood. I parked the truck, got out, and gave them a nod, thinking they were maybe private contractors doing parking enforcement for the HOA while I was gone. But the moment one of them stepped forward and barked, "You need to vacate the premises. This property is under HOA investigation," I knew something was seriously wrong. I was still setting my duffel bag down on the porch when I noticed the front door lock had been replaced. My welcome mat had been rolled up, and the American flag my wife proudly kept posted on the porch rail was gone. That's when I saw it, a paper slapped to the front door with blue painter's tape. Notice of enforcement trespassers will be prosecuted. My name wasn't on it. Instead, it mentioned unauthorized occupants and cited violations of some obscure bylaw I'd never seen before. The ink was barely dry. I asked where the HOA president was, and the guy just crossed his arms. "You'll need to leave or we'll be forced to detain you," he said, like he was starring in a B movie. That's when my wife, Rachel, stepped out from behind the house. She'd been doing morning drills in our backyard gym shed. Drenched in sweat, dressed in a Delta Force shirt and tactical pants, she looked calm at first. Then she saw the drawn weapon. One of the so-called HOA officers had pulled a pistol and was pointing it right at her. Big mistake. Rachel didn't shout. She didn't scream. She simply moved. In 1 second, she closed the distance and had the guy disarmed, his gun on the ground, and his wrist twisted behind his back so hard he screamed like a banshee. The second guy tried to reach for his taser, but she already had it out of his hands and tossed in the grass. When the cops showed up minutes later, real cops, mind you, Rachel, already had both men zip-tied to the porch post, seated politely, and their radios stacked in a neat pile like confiscated toys at a school. Principal's office. And that's how the war began. Chapter 1, Part 2. Federal firepower and HOA fallout Sheriff Martinez stepped out of his cruiser, looking every bit the old cowboy lawman in his boots and hat, and just blinked as he took in the scene. "I swear to God," he muttered, "only in this neighborhood." Rachel explained everything with chilling precision. She showed her federal ID, outlined the HOA's illegal entry, impersonation of law enforcement, and just to drive the point home handed over video footage from our house cameras. Sheriff Martinez didn't even wait for backup. He cuffed both men and called in the state to begin an immediate investigation. I called James, our lawyer, and within hours he was at the ranch with a binder under one arm and a smirk on his face. "They've officially messed with the wrong house," he said, flipping open the binder. "Time to make this personal." The HOA president, Karen Middleton, showed up 2 days later with her personal lawyer and a press rep. She stood in front of local reporters and tried to paint Rachel as aggressive, dangerous, and unstable. "We had no idea she was military," she said, with a practiced, sorrowful tone. But she overreacted. Those men feared for their lives. That didn't last long. Within hours, leaked footage hit social media body cam angles, security footage, Rachel's calm commands, and the moment she disarmed both men without causing permanent harm. In fact, one of the officers could be heard whispering, "Oh no," the moment Rachel identified herself as active Delta Force. The internet exploded. Hashtags like #DeltaWife and #HOA.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Tags like #DeltaWife and #HOAFail trended nationally. Military veterans flooded the HOA's social pages with memes, while legal experts called for the entire board's resignation. But we weren't laughing, yet we were preparing to go scorched earth. James filed a massive lawsuit against the HOA for unlawful entry, impersonation, mental distress, and endangerment of federal personnel. And thanks to Rachel's classified status, the federal government launched its own inquiry. Rachel and I started gathering statements from other neighbors, most of whom had quietly suffered under Karen's iron fist. Fines for garden gnomes, parking citations for vehicles left 5 minutes too long, threats over fence heights. One widow had even been fined for her late husband's memorial bench. At the emergency town meeting, Rachel and I walked in holding hands. Karen was already seated, chin high like royalty. But the moment she saw Rachel in her full military dress uniform bars, ribbons, and all her confidence cracked. Rachel took the mic. "You pointed a gun at the wrong person. But more importantly, you've been pointing metaphorical guns at everyone here for years. That ends now." Applause erupted. Tears rolled down one old man's cheek. Karen tried to speak, but the HOA board turned on her. 2 members quit on the spot. A vote of no confidence was issued, and within 20 minutes, Karen Middleton was removed as HOA president. We weren't done. We pushed for a full HLA audit. What we found was a tangled mess of shady budget allocations, fake security firms, and unauthorized surveillance on multiple properties. In the end, not only was the HOA dissolved, but Karen was personally sued by multiple families. The security goons were convicted, and Rachel received a formal apology from the state and federal government. We were even offered a documentary Deal Delta on the porch, they wanted to call it. Rachel declined. "This was never about fame," she said. "It was about showing bullies what happens when they cross the line. The ranch is quiet again now. Peaceful. Except on Sunday mornings, when Rachel does her drills out back just, in case someone forgets what happened the last time they tried to trespass. We also started a non-profit, Operation Homefront Defense. Its mission is to help veterans and civilians facing HOA abuse. Rachel gives self-defense seminars while I handle legal navigation with James. We've helped over 300 families in the first 6 months. And every now and then, when a new neighbor asks why the HOA doesn't exist here anymore, I just point toward the old gate where Rachel tied up 2 fake cops and smile. "Ask her," I say. "She'll give you the best version of the story." What we didn't expect, however, was the ripple effect our actions would have across the state. News stations picked up our story. HOA watchdog groups began interviewing us. We were invited to a panel in Austin about property rights, where Rachel stole the show by giving a passionate speech about freedom, service, and standing up for your home. Our victory was more than personal, it became symbolic. Messages poured in from other homeowners across the country dealing with overreaching HOAs. Some wanted legal advice, others just wanted hope. Rachel and I began hosting monthly webinars to coach people through legal loopholes and peaceful resistance. The barn we once used for storage is now the headquarters of Operation Homefront Defense. Every wall is lined with case files, photos, letters from thankful families, and a giant whiteboard that tracks every HOA we've helped reform or dissolve. Rachel jokes that she's become the Chuck Norris of homeowner rights. And in the quiet moments, when the sun dips behind the lake and the pine trees cast long shadows over our porch, we sit with a glass of sweet tea and remind each other, you only lose your land when you stop fighting for W. Rachel and I thought we'd finally found peace, but peace doesn't last long when your name keeps trending in HOA legal circles. Just 3 months after we shut down the old HOA and helped our neighbors reclaim their properties, a new board tried to rise from the ashes. This time they were calling themselves the Civic Beautification Councilor Sanitized name with the same bullying intentions. They claimed to be a grassroots effort to restore order and visual appeal to our rural neighborhood. We weren't fooled. They started their campaign with sugary newsletters, glossy flyers with bright flowers, smiling families, and talks of renewal. But nestled between the kind words were dark intentions. Words like mandatory compliance, shared community assets, and restoration of order raised red flags. Rachel called it a tyranny wrapped in tulips. Their first public meeting took place at the old HOA clubhouse, now dressed in fresh paint and potted plants. Rachel and I attended, quietly sitting in the back. The presentation began with grand promises green spaces, lakeside walking trails, noise control, and community safety patrols. But then the speaker, a tall, slick-haired man named Malcolm Fry, pivoted to their plan for the lake. He proposed opening it to all residents, charging seasonal fees, and forming a volunteer patrol unit that could fine trespassers use if we blocked access. Rachel stood up. "Who owns the lake?" she asked. Malcolm chuckled. "Ownership is a community matter. It's symbolic. I have the deed in my boot," she replied, deadpan. "And a court order on file." The meeting went downhill fast. We were shouted at, accused of hoarding, of being uncooperative. But the cracks were already forming. 2 families walked out with us. A week later, they dropped off anonymous tips about shady land assessments the new council was conducting. That's when we escalated. James, our lawyer, filed not just a cease and desist but a multi-tiered legal response. It included affidavits, boundary maps, and a complaint to the State Attorney General. Simultaneously, Rachel and I launched a media campaign. We contacted reporters who'd covered our original battle. A regional news piece aired showing footage of Malcolm mocking veterans and suggesting Rachel's military credentials were a public relations stunt. Big mistake. Veterans groups across the country lit up. One Marine Corps forum called Malcolm the HOA Napoleon. A retired colonel living 2 counties over offered us free drone footage to document illegal encroachments. We used it to show how the council had planted signposts and lights on land that wasn't theirs. But we weren't done. Rachel hosted a public town hall on our property, which we streamed online. Over 400 people showed up in person, and thousands watched live. She walked viewers through our deed history, legal battles, and the threats posed by overreaching HOAs disguised as civic councils. Her final line sealed it. "If they can take your lake, your lawn, or your liberty with a smile and a clipboard, they can take anything." Donations poured in to fund our legal costs, though most we redirected to help neighbours still caught in smaller disputes. James hired a second attorney, and we started preparing for full litigation. One of the most satisfying parts of the process was seeing our neighbours grow more confident.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
The process was seeing our neighbours grow more confident, standing up for their own rights as well. A group of them began volunteering at our non-profit, and Rachel organised weekly self-defence classes in the barn. Soon we were getting calls from neighbourhoods across the county and even a few out of state asking for help navigating HOA trouble. Some of these stories were heartbreaking. A disabled vet in Arizona had his solar panels forcibly removed. A widow in Florida was sued for keeping her husband's ashes in a backyard garden. These injustices lit a deeper fire in us. Rachel became more than just a defender of our land. She became a voice for every quiet victim who didn't have the training, the backing, or the courage to push back. She began consulting with national property rights groups, while James partnered with civil rights lawyers who specialized in land abuse cases. Meanwhile, back in our community, the Civic Beautification Council made one last desperate attempt. Malcolm, along with 2 remaining board members, held a private vote to try and reinstate authority over properties within a certain radius of the lake. It was illegal, of course, and we responded accordingly. We uncovered evidence of falsified signatures, including dead residents' names. We brought everything to light. This time, the county sheriff himself led the investigation. The evidence was overwhelming. Not only did it lead to the immediate arrest of Malcolm and 2 accomplices for fraud and conspiracy, but it also triggered a sweeping review of HOA operations statewide. State officials called for transparency reform, and Rachel was invited to testify before a legislative committee. She stood in front of a packed room in Austin, decked in her full military honors, and said, "The biggest threat to freedom is when we let small tyrants act unchecked. HOA, when corrupted, become that threat. A week later, the state passed a bill mandating independent audits of any HOA or similar body every 2 years. Back home, we celebrated quietly. Rachel and I took a canoe out onto the lake just after sunrise. Mist clung to the water, birds cut through the silence, and the reflection of our cabin shimmered like a promise kept. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. Every inch of shoreline, every pine tree leaning over the water, every ripple belonged to us. The non-profit continued to grow. Our barn-turned headquarters added a media room, a legal library, and a drone surveillance station. High school volunteers helped digitize old land records for residents, while Rachel mentored young women interested in law enforcement and defense careers. We even hosted a summer camp Liberty where kids learned civics, first aid, and their rights as citizens. The first session filled up in an hour. By the end of the summer, we had a waiting list, 3 counties long. And through it all, Rachel kept training. She never let her edge dull, and she made sure no one around her did either. She taught me to tactically, emotionally, and mentally. We were a unit. Our ranch gate has a new sign now. Freedom isn't given, it's guarded. Visitors stop, smile, and take pictures. Sometimes they ask if we'll write a book or make a movie. Maybe someday. For now, we're just happy knowing our lake is still ours. Our home still stands. Our neighbors sleep better. And when the sun sets over our lake, and Rachel holds my hand while we watch Blue nap on the porch, we know we didn't just survive, we changed things. Forever.